As I'm sure you've noticed, I talk a ton about attachment theory on this channel. And in this video, I'm going to keep it short and sweet and concisely discuss exactly what attachment theory is so you can know all about it in roughly the next 5 minutes. Attachment theory was developed by a British psychologist named John Bowlby all the way back in the 60s and then expanded upon by psychologists such as Mary Ainsworth. Thank you, John Bowlby, and the subsequent psychologists who researched and contributed to attachment theory, because once you learn how attachment works, its pivotal role in your healing work, and its pivotal role in all of your relationships and the way you see the world, it will change your life. So, what is attachment theory? Put simply, it's all about how our relationships with our parents or caregivers as infants and children affect our adult relationships, mainly our romantic relationships, because those are what, in our minds, replaces our early attachment to our caregivers. The reason why our relationship to our caregivers is so pivotal is because we literally depended on them for survival. So, for better or worse, we had to make it work with them. And these important first relationships were where we learned about relationships and what they even were. We are all biologically wired for attachment. Now, this first attachment taught us what attachment is to us as we know it. This is where we learned our rules for relating. It didn't matter if someone's caregivers were abusive, they had to learn what the rules were in making it work with abusers. It didn't matter if someone's caregivers were neglectful, they had to learn what the rules were in making it work with people who were neglecting them. It didn't matter if caregivers were inconsistent. They had to learn the rules on how to make it work with people who were inconsistent, and so on. These rules became our template for how we believe we are supposed to relate and attach. These rules get hardwired into our subconscious and unconscious. To us, this is just how the world is and the way things are supposed to be. We absolutely know no different. You can compare this to children learning that the sky is blue. There's no questioning it. It just is the way it is. These rules include the coping mechanisms we form, the way we handle conflict, our communication, our core wounds, which affect how we show up around others, and so much more. And then we grow up and we go out into the world, and there are lots of people, some with the same rules and some with wildly different rules. Now, this is where it can get tricky because in our subconscious and unconscious, we can find ourselves projecting from our own point of view and fill in the blanks for a lot of things that go on around us. For example, an anxious preoccupied may be thinking that a dismissive avoidant isn't interested in them because they text less, because the anxious preoccupied themselves would never text that little if they were truly interested. All of these initial rules are so deeply ingrained and cover so many areas that if we did not have good enough caretakers, we really have to do the work to heal. That being said, categories of caretakers have similar outputs, so the 4 different categories of attachment styles have common wounds and patterns. So, attachment theory can become your big North Star into what you need to heal in the way of childhood trauma to live the life that you want to live. Are there nuances? Yes, most definitely. But having a deep understanding of attachment theory is one of the most important tools you can have in your healing toolkit. Now let's cover the attachment styles real quick. There are 4 different attachment styles: securely attached, anxious preoccupied, fearful avoidant, and dismissive avoidant. Securely attached individuals had good enough caregivers and generally show up secure in romantic relationships, with their wounds being more situational and mild in comparison to the 3 insecure attachment styles. The anxious preoccupied attachment style, notably sometimes the clingy or needy partner, is the style that experienced real or perceived abandonment at an early age. They could have experienced an actual loss, or it can be that their caregivers were extremely present and met their needs whenever they were there, but perhaps worked a lot, So there was this meeting of needs and a very positive association to relationships, and then this fear that it will be taken away from them. The dismissive avoidant attachment style, known to be the hyper independent, slower moving partner, is the style that experienced neglect. This can be emotional neglect or it can be emotional and physical neglect. Sometimes it's hard to spot that they were neglected because they could have had all of their physical needs met, but maybe they were told that every time they cried, for instance, to just stop crying. They were actively shamed for their emotions, or they were attuned to so little that it equaled neglect. And that is not always easy to pinpoint and say, yeah, I went through that. And finally, the fearful avoidant attachment style, sometimes known as anxious avoidant or disorganized, that can be hot and cold, has the potential to be volatile, and usually has pretty strong trust issues, is the style that generally experienced the most trauma. This is the style formed from outright abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, or their environment just felt in some way incredibly unsafe, and they became accustomed to this unsafety. The fearful avoidant attachment style can also be formed from very consistent little t traumas. Consistent little t traumas add up. They make a strong subconscious comfort zone. An example of repetitive little t traumas that can form this attachment style could be simply a parent repetitively often crossing the child's boundaries or repetitively punishing the child for having boundaries. Well, I hope that this has been informative and has given you an understanding of attachment theory in a nutshell. If it was, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't. Thanks for your engagement.